To share a little bit of my conversation with Christina Applegate, talking at length for the first time about her multiple sclerosis diagnosis. Her emotions, as you can imagine, still raw, but she is determined to live life to the fullest.
For nearly 4 decades, the woman who played Kelly Bundy made America laugh week after week without ever revealing what was happening behind the scenes. Now, after a quiet hospitalization, a brutal new health update, and stories so heartbreaking that even her closest castmates have struggled to talk about them, Christina Applegate has finally opened up about what her life actually looks like today. What she revealed is going to change how you see her forever. The hospital stay that nobody was supposed to know about. In April of 2026, reports began leaking from Los Angeles that Christina Applegate had been quietly admitted to a hospital weeks earlier. She had not appeared in public for almost a month. She had not posted anything on her social media accounts. Her podcast had skipped a recording cycle without explanation. Fans started worrying out loud online, and within days, the worry had turned into something close to panic across the internet. When the news finally broke, Christina handled it the way she has handled almost every difficult moment of the last few years. She broke her silence on Instagram with a short message that managed to be both reassuring and absolutely heartbreaking at the same time. She told her followers that health issues were a constant for her now, but that she was a strong woman and that she was getting stronger and better every single day. She said she was simply taking a moment to focus on her health and that she would be back with more to say soon enough. Her co-host, Jamie Lynn Sigler, appeared on a late-night show shortly afterward and offered her own update. She said Christina was doing better than she had been. She said she was getting stronger. She said she was on her way back. But the tone of her voice told a story that her words were trying not to say. Anyone watching could tell that this had been serious. Anyone watching could tell that the people closest to Christina had been genuinely frightened during those weeks. What made the hospitalization particularly devastating for fans was the timing of it. Christina had just released a memoir only a few weeks earlier. She had just done a string of emotional interviews about that book. She had just appeared on a late-night show looking radiant and happy. Then, she had simply vanished, and the silence around her absence had become its own kind of news story before anyone in her camp was ready to address it. The hospital stay was reportedly connected to complications from her ongoing battle with multiple sclerosis. Specific details were never released publicly, and Christina has chosen not to discuss what actually happened during those weeks. What she did make clear in the messages she released afterward was that her body had once again reminded her that the disease was always going to dictate the rhythm of her life now, no matter how much she fought against it. What fans did not realize at the time was that this hospitalization was only the most recent chapter in a much longer story Christina had been telling in pieces over the previous 12 months. And the next thing she revealed, on her own podcast, and then in her memoir, was something so personal that even the people who had known her for decades had no idea she had been carrying it. The burial plot she bought for herself. In an interview that aired on public radio earlier in 2026, Christina shared something that stopped the conversation cold. She told the interviewer, with a kind of quiet calmness, that she had already gone out and bought her burial plots. Not just one, 3 of them, lined up together. She talked about how she planned to take a friend out there for a picnic one afternoon when the weather was nicer. She said the location was actually really pretty. The matter-of-fact way she discussed it caught the entire interviewing world off guard. Most celebrities, when faced with chronic illness, hide from the topic of mortality entirely. Christina has chosen the opposite path. She has decided to talk about it openly, with humor when she can manage humor, and with brutal honesty when the humor will not come. She has described the disease as something that either kills her eventually or gets outlived by something else. And she has admitted that some days she does not particularly care which one wins. She bought the plots because she wanted her family to have one less terrible decision to make when the time came. She bought them because she wanted control over at least one piece of this experience, when so much of the rest of it had been taken from her without her consent. And she bought them because, she said, the one thing this disease had given her was a clarity about what mattered and what did not. Funeral logistics, in her view, did not matter very much. Spending time with her daughter Sadie did. Talking to Ed O'Neill on the phone for hours did. Recording her podcast with Jamie Lynn did. The reaction online was complicated. Some fans were heartbroken at the very idea that she was thinking about these things at all. Others praised her for the honesty, saying that she was modeling something most chronic illness sufferers never get to see modeled in public. Christina herself addressed the reaction in a follow-up episode of her podcast. She said she had not meant to upset anyone. She said this was simply how she lived now, and how she thought about things now, and that pretending otherwise would be exhausting in ways she could not afford anymore. The burial plot conversation revealed something else, too. It revealed how completely her perspective on her own future had shifted since the diagnosis. The Christina Applegate of even 5 years earlier would never have spoken publicly about something this private. The Christina of today seems to have decided that privacy itself was a luxury she had given away too freely for too many years, and that the only thing left worth doing was telling the truth about absolutely everything. What she revealed next about her actual day-to-day existence inside her own home painted a picture of her life that even her most devoted fans were not prepared to hear. The house she almost never leaves anymore. On a recent appearance on a popular late-night podcast, Christina described what her daily reality has become in a way she had never described it before. She told the host that she does not really leave the house anymore. If people could see what her life was actually like on a daily basis, she said, they would not be able to do it themselves. Sometimes, she admitted, she could not even do it herself. Going to the bathroom, she explained, felt like walking on needles and hot lava. Her hands had begun cramping in ways that made simple tasks impossible. She could not always pick up her phone. She could not always open bottles. She lay in bed at night and screamed because of the sharp pains, the deep aching, the sensation of being squeezed by something invisible. She described nights when the pain had traveled from her legs into her hands so completely that she could not remember what it felt like to exist without it. The first thing people always asked her, she said, was how she had gotten the disease. The implication behind the question always felt the same. They were asking, without quite asking, what she had done wrong in her life to have ended up here. As if a body breaking down on its own was something that had to be earned through poor choices. She had stopped trying to correct the assumption. She simply told them she was never good. She was just less terrible on the days she was lucky. She has begun dealing with sensory issues that were not part of the original diagnosis. Sounds that other people barely notice now feel 5,000 times louder to her. Crowded rooms became impossible. Restaurants became overwhelming. Even the noise of her own television in the wrong room of the house could send her into a kind of nervous shutdown that took hours to recover from. She had started naming her body parts to try to cope with what felt like a betrayal coming from inside her own skin. Her right hand, she has told audiences on multiple talk shows, is named Barbara. Her left hand is named Stanley. Barbara is married to Stanley but is gay and lives with a friend in the elaborate fictional life Christina has created for them. Her left leg is named after a famous British royal. Her right leg is named after an old sitcom character. When her body parts misbehave, she yells at them by name and tells them to stop. When asked whether this approach actually worked, she said that it absolutely did, because the disease itself was a brain disorder, and the brain responds to whatever rituals you train it with. The humor she uses has become her armor. But the humor is not hiding anything. It is simply how she chooses to deliver the worst news of her own life to the people who love her. And the worst news, she has admitted recently, is that she does not believe she will ever act on camera again. The career she said goodbye to without a single goodbye. When Christina filmed the final season of her Netflix series Dead to Me, she did not know yet that it would be the last on-camera role of her career. She had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis only months before production resumed. She has since said that she felt an obligation to her co-star Linda Cardellini and to her showrunner Liz Feldman to finish what they had started together, even when the people producing the show had quietly told her that they would understand if she could not. She said no to that offer. She said the show was going to be finished, but it was going to be finished on her terms. Production paused for roughly 5 months, while she figured out what was even physically possible. When she returned, the entire show had been rebuilt around her body. Sound technicians lay on the floor out of frame and physically held her legs up during certain scenes. Other shots were reblocked completely. She used a wheelchair when the cameras were not rolling. Linda Cardellini protected her like family. The show itself wrapped in late 2022. Since then, Christina has said publicly that she likely will not work on camera again. The version of acting that requires long days on set, fluorescent lights, walking marks, and physical stamina is no longer available to her body. She has accepted this, although accepting it has not made it any easier to talk about. She has called Linda Cardellini the greatest actress she ever worked with, and she has said she is grateful that her last on-camera performance was opposite someone she loved that completely. She has not retired entirely. Voice work remains possible because it can be done from a small recording booth, with her seated and with breaks whenever she needs them. She has said that voiceover keeps her brain working and that she has to support her family. The entertainment industry that used to chase her for live-action roles has had to adjust to a Christina who can only be heard, not seen. So far, the industry has mostly cooperated. What she has lost, in ways that go beyond paychecks, is the part of her identity that was tied up in being seen. For nearly 40 years, being on camera was simply who she was. Cameras were the rooms she walked into. Cameras were the audiences she performed for. Cameras were the way she communicated with the world. Now most of her communication happens through a microphone in her home, into a podcast that has become one of the most surprising hits of the last 2 years. The podcast has given her back something she had been losing. It has given her a community that has nothing to do with cameras and everything to do with the part of herself that the disease had been trying to take from her. And it has given her a co-host who understood her situation in a way that almost nobody else in Hollywood possibly could. The friendship that saved her when nobody else could. Jamie Lynn Sigler, who played mezzo-soprano on the legendary HBO drama, was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at age 20 in 2001. She kept the diagnosis private for 15 years. When she finally went public in 2016, she became one of the only major actresses in Hollywood living openly with the disease. When Christina was diagnosed 5 years later, Jamie Lynn was one of the first people who reached out. The two of them launched their podcast together in March of 2024. They called it Messy, with the letters M and S deliberately capitalized inside the word. The premise was simple. Two women, both actresses, both living with multiple sclerosis, would sit down once a week and talk about whatever they wanted to talk about. Sometimes the topic was the disease. Sometimes the topic was their careers. Sometimes the topic was something embarrassing that had happened to one of them in the previous 7 days. What made the show work was that neither of them was performing. Christina has said openly on the podcast that she had been playing a character called Christina Applegate for 40 years, a character she had wanted everyone to think she actually was, because that performance had been easier than the truth. The podcast became, in her words, her real coming-out party, not as a celebrity, not as a survivor, as a woman who had finally decided that the version of herself she had been selling for decades was not going to be the version she died with. Jamie Lynn keeps her going on the days when she does not want to keep going. Christina has said this directly, with the audio rolling, more than once. She has described herself as flipping the bird at this disease all day long, and she has admitted that she is angry, deeply pissed, and she is not going to apologize for being angry. Jamie Lynn responds with the gentleness that Christina has said she desperately needs. She tells her she has her. She tells her she is going to be okay. She tells her that the anger is allowed. The podcast has welcomed extraordinary guests. Ed O'Neill came on for what became one of the most listened to episodes of 2024. Katie Sagal came on twice and revealed her own decades of alcoholism, telling Christina that as an alcoholic, she also dealt with what she called a life-threatening illness, one that brought her own mortality to the front of her mind in ways most people never had to face. These conversations have given Christina something the entertainment industry could never give her. They have given her witnesses, people who had known her at 15, at 20, at 30, at 40, were now sitting across from her at 50+ and acknowledging out loud what she had been quietly experiencing for years. She had not been imagining things. She had not been overreacting. She had been carrying something real. And the people who loved her had been carrying it alongside her in ways they had never said out loud until now. Then came the memoir, and with it came a confession that changed how the entire world understood her time on Married with Children. The eating disorder she hid in plain sight for a decade. In March of 2026, Christina released her memoir. The title was You with the Sad Eyes, taken from the Cyndi Lauper song True Colors that had been important to her as a teenager. The book became a New York Times bestseller almost immediately. The audiobook, which she narrated herself from her bed because she could no longer sit in a recording booth for long stretches, contained portions during which she was clearly crying. The most shocking revelation in the book was something she had also discussed on her podcast in the months leading up to publication. Throughout her years on Married with Children, beginning when she was just 15 years old, Christina had been suffering from severe anorexia. She had hidden it from almost everyone. She had hidden it from the press. She had hidden it from the public. She had even hidden it from herself in some ways by treating it as a professional necessity rather than a disease. She described how she had wanted her bones to stick out. She had deprived herself of food for years on end. She had hidden in airplane bathrooms during international flights to eat in secret because the shame around food had become so overwhelming that she could not eat in front of other people. The costume department had been altering her size 0 clothing to make it even smaller, week after week, season after season. The whole production had known something was wrong. None of them had known how to stop it. If she ate a bagel during a filming day, she would scoop out the inside and eat half of one half. That would be her entire food intake for the day. She had been 17 years old at that point. She had been working 10 and 12-hour days on a show that was watched by tens of millions of people every week. And she had been doing it on essentially no calories at all. The pressure to maintain the body that the Kelly Bundy character had been built around came from everywhere. Christina herself had pushed for the wardrobe originally, after seeing a documentary about heavy metal culture and deciding that her character should look like something pulled out of that world. But once she made that choice, she became trapped inside it. The skirts kept getting tighter. The shorts kept getting shorter. The producers wanted her thinner, and a teenager with a complicated childhood was now starving herself in front of a national audience that thought she was just playing dumb for laughs. Katie Sagal confirmed the entire story when she came on the podcast. She said Christina had been scrutinized intensely by the people running the show. They had tried to keep her in a box, dressing her in clothes that were inappropriate for what was, at the time of her arrival on the show, a literal child. Christina had been 15 years old when production began. She had turned 16, then 17, then 18, all while being marketed as a teen idol on primetime American television. The set, Christina has admitted, was sarcastic and cynical to a fault. The cast was not safe with one another. The moment you turned your back, somebody was going to talk badly about you. She once overheard the entire cast trashing her through a monitor in her own dressing room trailer when they thought she could not hear them. She was a teenage girl whose only stable family was that production, and she had heard the people she trusted most tear her apart in private. What kept her sane during those years, she has now revealed, was one specific person who had quietly decided that she was not going to be left alone inside any of it. The man who became her father and stayed that way forever. Ed O'Neill was 41 years old when he was finally cast as Al Bundy after a long and difficult road through theater and small film roles. He had grown up in Youngstown, Ohio, the son of a steelworker. He had played college football. He had been signed as an undrafted free agent by the Pittsburgh Steelers in 1969 and had been cut during training camp by Chuck Noll, competing for a roster spot against Joe Green and L.C. Greenwood. He had taught social studies at his old high school. He had walked into a brand new theater program at his alma mater and become one of its earliest students. By the time he met Christina, he had been turned down for two of the biggest sitcom roles of the decade. When he saw a 15-year-old girl on his new show carrying obvious weight that no teenager should have to carry, something in him decided to do something about it. Christina has spoken about this on her podcast, with Ed sitting right beside her, both of them now well into their later years. She told him directly, on air, that he had raised her. "If you do not like anything about her," she said, "that was his fault. If you do like anything about her, that was also his fault. He went through everything with her. When her mother battled cancer, he was there. When the producers wanted things from her that she was not ready to give, he was the one who quietly made it clear that there were lines that would not be crossed. He drove her home after late-night shoots. He called her mother to reassure her. He stood up to executives in conversations that Christina herself was not always in the room for. The two of them now talk on the phone for hours at a time. Christina has said with the audio rolling that she talks to Ed more than to anyone else on the telephone in her entire life. The bond that began on a soundstage in 1987 has somehow deepened across nearly 40 years, and the disease that took so much from Christina has, ironically, brought the two of them even closer than they were before. Ed has been one of the most consistent presences in her life since the diagnosis. He calls, he visits, he texts. When she received her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in November of 2022, only months after she had revealed the diagnosis, he was watching every moment of it from afar. When she received her standing ovation at the Emmy Awards in early 2024, he was watching that, too, beaming with the kind of pride that fathers reserve for their daughters. When the four Married with Children castmates finally walked out onto that stage at the Wiltern Theater in January of 2026 for their long-awaited reunion, Ed sat beside her the entire night. He held her hand. He whispered things in her ear that made her laugh. He helped her stand when she needed to stand and let her sit when she needed to sit. He had been doing this for her since she was a teenager. He was going to keep doing it for as long as he could. What comes next, and why the world is watching so closely. Christina herself has said she has no idea what comes next. She has said this in interviews, she has said it on her podcast, she has said it in her memoir. The disease is unpredictable. Some weeks are better than others. Some months feel almost normal. Other months feel like the world is collapsing onto her in ways she cannot describe to anyone who has not lived through something similar. What she does know is what matters to her now. Her daughter Sadie matters. Her husband, Martin Lenoble, the Dutch musician she married in 2013, matters. Her TV family from Married with Children matters. Her real family, scattered across the country, matters. Her podcast and the community of women living with multiple sclerosis who have written to her by the thousands matters more than she had ever expected anything to matter. She has been asked many times whether she has any regrets about how openly she has spoken about all of this. She has been asked whether she wishes she had kept the diagnosis private. She has been asked whether she wishes she had not written the memoir or launched the podcast or talked about her body the way she has talked about her body. The answer, every single time, has been no. The honesty has been the only part of this experience that has felt like hers and hers alone. Everything else, the disease, the pain, the loss of her career, was given to her without her consent. The decision to talk about all of it openly was the only thing she got to choose. She has said that the worst part of the entire experience has not been the physical pain. Although the physical pain has been considerable, the worst part has been watching the people she loves most watch her go through it. Sadie has had to grow up alongside a mother whose body keeps changing in front of her. Martin has had to learn how to love a wife whose abilities keep narrowing in ways neither of them had ever imagined when they married. Her friends have had to figure out how to keep showing up for her in the ways she still needs them to show up. But they have all kept showing up, every single one of them. Ed calls almost every day. Katie checks in constantly. David Faustino organized the entire Wiltern reunion specifically because he wanted Christina to have one more night of feeling exactly the way she used to feel before any of this happened. Jamie Lynn Sigler sits across from her every week and listens. Selma Blair, who first told her to get tested for the disease back during the Dead to Me filming days, remains one of her closest friends. Christina has said that the disease has taken almost everything from her. It has taken her career as she knew it. It has taken her physical independence. It has taken her ability to walk into rooms without thinking about every single step. It has taken her ability to leave the house most days, and the freedom of feeling like her own body belonged to her. But it has not taken the people. The people have refused to leave. The people have decided, every single one of them, that whatever happens next, they are going to be there for it. What do you think about everything Christina has been going through and how she is choosing to handle it all? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let us know.